You're listening to Short History Shorts audio, where history speaks louder than images. The Pyrrhic War, 280-275 BC, stands as one of the most fascinating episodes in the early history of the Roman Republic. Not only because it pitted Rome against a formidable opponent from the Hellenistic world, but also because it marked the Republic's first direct military engagement with a seasoned Greek-style army led by a king who was, in his own time, considered one of the greatest military commanders alive. The war was named after King Pyrrhus of Epirus, a relative of Alexander the Great's family and a man whose ambition matched his skill in battle. The conflict's significance goes far beyond a mere contest of arms. It was a cultural collision between the pragmatic, disciplined, citizen-soldier legions of Rome and the glittering, sophisticated but politically fractious world of Hellenistic Greece. This war brought to Italy the tactics, formations and elephants of Alexander's successors and gave Rome a taste of the kind of warfare it would later face across the Mediterranean. The term Pyrrhic victory, born from this war, still resonates today, describing a triumph won at such a devastating cost that it leaves the victor in a worse position than before. To truly understand the Pyrrhic War, we need to step back and examine the political and military landscape of Italy in the late 4th and early 3rd centuries BC. By this time, Rome had already risen from a modest city-state to the dominant power in central Italy. Through the Samnite Wars and other conflicts, Rome had developed a military machine that was highly adaptable, resilient and relentless. However, the Greek cities of southern Italy, collectively known as Magna Graecia, retained their independence and often looked to the wider Greek world for support in disputes. One of these cities, Tarentum, modern Taranto, was particularly proud, wealthy and protective of its autonomy. Tarentum had a strong navy and a tradition of interfering in the affairs of its neighbours. Relations between Rome and Tarentum were tense, governed by treaties that limited Roman naval access to certain waters. Yet as Rome expanded southward, the two powers were inevitably drawn into conflict. The spark came in 282 BC, when a Roman fleet entered the Gulf of Tarentum, allegedly in violation of the treaty. The Tarentines, seeing this as a direct provocation, attacked the Roman ships, sinking several and capturing others. They followed up by mocking and insulting Roman envoys sent to negotiate, a grave breach of diplomatic norms. Rome, never tolerant of such slights, prepared for war. Tarentum, realizing it could not face Rome alone, sought help from across the Adriatic. It turned to Pyrrhus, king of Epirus, a warrior with a restless spirit and a grand vision of empire. Pyrrhus, born in 319 BC, was not only a cousin by marriage to Alexander the Great's family, but also a commander with a deep understanding of both the Macedonian phalanx and the use of combined arms. He saw in Tarentum's plea an opportunity to establish a Western empire, perhaps uniting the Greeks of Italy and Sicily under his leadership, and eventually challenging Carthage and Rome alike. With this ambition, he gathered an army of around 25,000 men, including heavy phalanx infantry, cavalry, light troops, and most famously, war elephants, animals rarely, if ever, seen on Italian battlefields before. In 280 BC, Pyrrhus landed in southern Italy and took control of Tarentum, enforcing strict military discipline on its citizens and using the city as a base of operations. His first major test came at the Battle of Heraclea, fought against the Romans under Consul Publius Valerius Laevinus. The battle showcased the stark differences between the two military systems. The Roman legions, organized into maniples, relied on flexibility, initiative, and close-quarter combat with the gladius and pila. The Greek phalanx, by contrast, was a solid wall of pikes, almost impenetrable from the front but less maneuverable. The clash was fierce, and for much of the day neither side gained the upper hand, until Pyrrhus unleashed his elephants. These massive beasts terrified the Roman horses and soldiers unused to such creatures, breaking the Roman lines and forcing them to retreat. Pyrrhus had won a stunning victory, but at a heavy cost. He had lost many of his best officers and soldiers, losses not easily replaced far from home. Pyrrhus's hope was that his victory would encourage Rome to negotiate, But the Roman Senate, bolstered by the resolve of its citizens, refused to consider peace while an enemy remained on Italian soil. Instead, Rome raised new armies and prepared for another campaign. Pyrrhus, impressed by Roman resilience, is said to have remarked, "If I had such soldiers, I could conquer the world." In 279 BC, the two sides met again at the Battle of Asculum. The terrain favoured neither side, and after 2 days of bloody fighting, Pyrrhus again emerged victorious, but again at an unsustainable cost. Thousands of his men lay dead or wounded, and replacements were scarce. It was after Asculum that Pyrrhus is said to have uttered the famous words, "Another such victory and we are undone." This sentiment captured the essence of what we now call a Pyrrhic victory, winning the battle but losing the war of attrition. Pyrrhus now looked for new opportunities. Sicily beckoned, its Greek cities under threat from Carthage. In 278 BC, he crossed to the island and, in a brilliant campaign, drove the Carthaginians back to their stronghold at Lilybaeum. Yet his harsh demands and autocratic rule alienated his Sicilian allies, and the Carthaginians, ever resourceful, began to recover. Facing discontent in Sicily and renewed threats in Italy, Pyrrhus returned to the mainland in 276 BC to confront the Romans once more. The final major battle came at Beneventum in 275 BC. This time the Romans, under consul Manius Curius Dentatus, fought on ground that neutralized Pyrrhus's elephants and allowed their legions to maneuver effectively. The battle ended in a Roman victory, and Pyrrhus, recognizing that his ambitions in Italy were finished, withdrew to Epirus. For Pyrrhus, the war was a costly gamble that drained his resources and failed to achieve his grand aims. He returned to Greece, where he met his end in 272 BC in a street fight in Argos, struck down by a roof tile thrown by a woman, a humbling death for a man who had faced Rome at its rising. The Pyrrhic War had far-reaching consequences. For Rome, it was a proving ground that demonstrated the legions could stand against and ultimately defeat the best the Hellenistic world could offer. Rome's victory cemented its dominance over southern Italy and brought many Greek cities under its influence. Culturally, the Pyrrhic War brought Rome into closer contact with Greek warfare, tactics, and diplomacy. It also set a precedent for Rome's future interactions with the Hellenistic kingdoms, conflicts that would eventually bring the entire Greek world under Roman rule. The war's enduring legacy lies in the lesson it teaches about the costs of victory and the dangers of overreaching ambition. Pyrrhus's name lives on, not as the founder of a Western empire, but as a warning that even the greatest generals can win themselves